And we welcome you to this live edition of In the Circle season preview as we get you set for the 2022 Division I college softball season. I'm Eric Lopez alongside the almighty Victor Anderson, who is applying for the head coaching job of the Dolphins. Is that why you're wearing a Dolphins jacket? Are you applying?
I may or may not be subtly giving a hint to our owner that I may be interested in a position within the organization, yes. So if you don't hear from me in the next couple of weeks, you probably know why.
Okay. So
we got Justin speechless, and we're only a minute into the show.
Now joining us is from extra inning softball, Justin McLeod joining us. You're not applying for any head coaching jobs, are you?
I'd like to plead the fifth on that.
All right, there you go. Coming up on this show, we'll talk about some of the top stories in college softball 2022 and go through some of the key stories in some of the major conferences and our very, very popular Women's College World Series picks. I think there's some of them right there behind Justin McLeod on that. This is pretty special here. Of course, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page and give us a thumbs up as well. And you'll see some of the press conferences throughout the season in college softball from all divisions, exclusive interviews, you name it. It's all on our subscription. And, of course, our regular podcast on In the Circle SB. You can follow that, subscribe on wherever you listen to your favorite podcast devices. We will have a season preview of podcast edition Monday. Justin will be a part of that after the show. In fact, me and Justin will do this right after the show. So we got a long night ahead. We'll be joined by a special guest, which we'll announce later on in the program there.
Yes.
All right, boys, let's get to it. We're going to have some guests joining us here. Jenna Becerra will be joining us later on here in a little bit to talk a little Pac-12 and her thoughts on the season. It's her third season of her podcast will be starting soon as well. So we'll get all the details on that. Let's get to it, though. Let me ask you both of these questions. What is the number one most intriguing storyline of 2022 you're looking forward to, Vic?
For me, I will probably have to say the return of Miranda Ellis because she sat out all last season due to COVID concerns. And before the season got shortened in 2020, she was on her way to being Player of the Year at Texas. Now she's at Oklahoma State, hasn't played in over 500 days. So are we going to see – and it's interesting in that – she won't be asked to carry the load both in the circle, pun intended, and in the batter spots because Oklahoma State has Keely Maxwell, who a lot of people feel could be on the short list for Pitcher of the Year, Player of the Year candidates, and probably one of the most dynamic offenses in all of softball, led by All-American Haley Busby, and of course with Cheyenne Factor as well. So if they can get the Miranda Ellis that performed in Texas in 2020, Oklahoma State can go real far in this season for Kenny Gasky, who we recently had on our podcast to talk about that.
That's right. In fact, make sure if you name it, Big 12, we had every coach in the Big 12 on this show. You could listen to our archives for that. We had pretty much 9 ACC coaches on this show over the last few months. That's in our archives, YouTube, and on our podcast. 11 SEC coaches on the show, ladies and gentlemen. You name it. We've covered every conference. Justin, what's your number one storyline?
I'm curious to see if Oklahoma can repeat. As good as Oklahoma is, you've got the Allo home run chase, you've got the young offense, you've got Jordy Ball. But for me, the larger picture is it's really difficult to go back to back when doing something like winning a national championship, to not somehow be tripped up along the way, to not run into somebody who just has a good weekend. So for me, I want to see if Oklahoma can repeat. We saw how dominant they were last year. We know how dominant they look coming in this year. But for me, I want to see – we know they have what it takes, but can Oklahoma get the job done 2 years in a row? And what happens along the way for me is something I'm really interested in and intrigued by.
One of them interesting storylines to me is who's this year's JMU? Is there an out there? And Victor, you've got a we got a little game we're going to do from time to time on this show that involves some of the conferences where we might see a team that's the next JMU that makes a deep run in the postseason, don't we?
Yes, Eric. And now this is something that is come my when you have a brain when you have hair like this, you have a lot of ideas that are like springing out of it. And one of the ideas that we have that I will share with the audience right now, but as we get away Jenna Becerra, is something that I like to call the wheel of softball. So what you're seeing here is some of the conferences that Eric and Justin will be talking about during the episode on Monday. So what I will do is I will spin the wheel.
Let's try it right now. Let's go with one right now. Let's just to show.
Let me get that working. Here we go.
Justin's really nervous. He's been talking about this for weeks since you brought up this idea here.
There we go.
We're missing a Vanna White. That's what we need to get a Vanna White for this.
And we start at the Big East. The Big East. Now, the Big East is kind of fascinating here because we had Bridget Orchard from Villanova on the podcast earlier in the winter. And everyone knows Villanova, Paige Rao, the Big East Player of the Year on preseason All-American list, somehow was not named on the USA Softball Top 50 Player of the Year watch list, which is a whole nother rant that I will get into at a later time. But do you feel, gentlemen, that this could be the year that Villanova made a tournament for the first time ever last year? Are we kind of underrating the Big East potentially? Because it's essentially Villanova, UConn, DePaul, and then who's going to emerge as the fourth team?
All right, the Big East tournament will be back there. I don't know if they're underrated. I mean, they had a really good 2021. We've had Bridget Orchard, Laura Valentino, the UConn head coach, and Tracy Addick-Zins on this show. And look, Paige Rao might be the best two-way player out there that people are not familiar with. I think Villanova is a candidate to be this year's JMU. They have the experience winning the Big East tournament last year, getting to the NCAAs. They were a 3 seed in Tucson. And Paige Rao is that's a team that can give teams problems. They can swing the bats. What's going to be fascinating is you got Connecticut, Valentino. They were in the Big East final last year. They bring back a good core there, Justin. And then DePaul, the committee never told us who the first 4 out, the only sport where we have to keep a secret of who was left out because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Ooh, clowns. So we don't know, but perhaps DePaul might have been one of the first 4 out as it is with last year. Maybe if they would have made a run to the Big East tournament, they might have gotten in as a second Big East team. It's going to be a little more challenging this year with the situation, obviously, with the Ivy League back and the situation with the Colonial, which we'll get to, where James Madison's not eligible for the conference tournament, which could present potentially a second bid for the league. We'll see. But I don't know. Your thoughts here, Justin. I know we're going to go in depth on the Big East on the Monday podcast, but give me a quick glance, your thoughts on the Big East there.
Well, I think over the last couple of years, the Big East really has grown in strength. And you mentioned UConn, DePaul, and Villanova. I think that's a really strong top tier for the Big East. Something that, probably would have been laughed at for saying several years ago, a strong 3-team top tier for Big East softball. But I think it's a testament to the how each of them has grown. And I think the one thing that's interesting about it is Villanova finally cracked that tournament, the ceiling for the tournament. DePaul won the regular season, and UConn was there in the conference tournament championship. So all 3 of them, I think, showed different strengths last year, or strength in different ways last year. And I think coming into this year, I think the big thing is going to be, when you play each other, who's going to come out ahead? Because, there's a chance that you could have a couple of teams that maybe, have really good weekends against one of those other top-tier teams. And then it presents a really interesting conundrum come tournament time. You're right. DePaul was a high RPI last year, with a better showing in the conference tournament, could have, gotten some more traction. But I think this year, having for the Big East to have 3 teams that strong all at the same time, that's a really strong testament to the league. I think it's a really positive sign for the league.
Yeah, having good coaches helps there, to say the least. So that's a little sample of what we might do, sprinkle in time to time on this show. We will go very in-depth on the Monday podcast. If you're a mid-major fan, this is the only place where you will go in-depth coverage. We'll have over 25 conferences we'll be talking on the Monday podcast between Justin and, oh, by the way, that special guest we have that'll be alongside Justin, which we'll reveal.
We're gonna announce that guest towards the end of the show. So
it's a
stay
bigger
tuned. If nothing else for that.
Some might say it's a bigger guest than Justin, and Justin actually says that.
I would say that actually.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But that's going to be interesting. The other big storyline, I think, guys, the Big Ten. What do we expect to see from the Big Ten? Remember last year, they were kind of the enigma. They played a conference only. They only had 3 bids. Justin, you and I have heard from many coaches weren't pleased with that. In fact, I checked out the Iowa media day, and they're still upset. They felt they should have been in. And, I don't want to, dive into the whole dynamics last year, but this year they're back to more of a non-conference schedule. Interesting to see the Big Ten and a big storyline that's developed in the Big Ten that you both will be covering in Leesburg, Florida. Are you guys roommates, by the way, in Leesburg? Are you guys like, it's funny you both, but one of the top players in the country, Victor, you mentioned Miranda Ellis coming back after a year off. Wisconsin, Justin, has maybe the best, arguably the best player in the Big Ten, a former Big Ten Player of the Year back.
Yeah, Kayla Conwent. And it was just a couple of weeks ago, Wisconsin just, I get an email in my inbox, oh, Kayla Conwent's returning for the 2022 season. It's like, oh. I mean, you're talking about somebody who was the Big Ten Player of the Year in 2019, the last time the Big Ten had a normal season, and she raked. She's overcome a lot of injuries and other difficulties just during her career to get to that point. She goes out and has a great year, and then 2020 gets snatched out from under everybody. Wisconsin doesn't bring back their super seniors in 2021. So it's like, okay, well, she's done. Well, no, she's not. And I mean, that immediately vaults Wisconsin to a different level. I mean, she's that kind of a bat. She's that kind of a talent in the batter's box. And she's that kind of a weapon, because that's the thing. If you have, maybe a weak offense, or maybe you have, don't have that fixture in your offense, well, now all of a sudden Conwent, that's exactly what she is, and it makes the rest of your offense better too, because, Conwent comes up, maybe you don't want to pitch to her, maybe you walk her, well, then that sets somebody up who might have been the big hitter outside her, and it just gives you depth. I mean, it's a really positive thing for the Badgers. Anytime you can bring back a player like that, and by the way, she's got 2 years of eligibility left if she wants to use them. So that's a big deal for Wisconsin, and it's a game changer for the Big Ten, because all of a sudden Wisconsin's back on the – I don't want to say they're back on the relevance train. I don't think they were irrelevant, but they're certainly back in the discussion at a higher level than they were before Conwent announced her return.
Agreed. Victor, I know you're looking forward to seeing her in person when you're in Leesburg that next weekend.
Yeah, Wisconsin is going to be fascinating to see. And really about the Big Ten schools, guys, how they handle being back playing non-conference games. Because the conference RPI for the Big Ten took a severe hit in 2021 because of the fact that they played a conference-only schedule. And if you saw on Selection Sunday, when Eric and I went live when we saw the selections, they got punished for it. Northwestern being a 4 seed, going to Gainesville. The whole Michigan saga, them being a 2 seed, having me shipped out to Seattle to take on Washington. With them playing a non-conference schedule, naturally their RPI as a conference is going to go up. Will that eventually lead to more teams making it from the Big Ten into the tournament? We will have to wait and see how that unfolds.
Of course, the other major storyline, especially early in the season, but we're very fortunate in Florida. You got the marquee tournament, the debut of the Leesburg tournament, where Kayla Conwent will make her return. We'll talk about that field here at the end of the show. But Carol Hutchins, Michigan head coach, going to more than likely pass Mike Condrea here in the first couple of weeks for the all-time wins leader in Division I. Justin, you and I were at the Michigan press conference this past week, where Hutch pretty much blew off my question about the passing Condrea's wins mark. Didn't want anything to do with it. But I do think that's an interesting story, not only from the Big Ten for the country, is Michigan. And you brought this up, I think, they got Megan Bobian back, Alex Storako back, Lexi Blair back, but they haven't been to the Women's College World Series here in a little while. Could we see Michigan make the back to OKC in the year where Hutch becomes the all-time leader in Division I? I think that's a big storyline too we're looking forward to this year.
Well, truth be told, I mean, it's one of those things. Michigan, this is probably the best Michigan team that they've had in several years. Storako and Bobian, we know what they're made of. It's the best 1-2 pitching combo in the country. And then you've got Lexi Blair, you've got Christina Burkhart added by a transfer. So you've got a really solid offensive lineup. I really do think it's the best it's the best roster, I should say, that Michigan's had in the last several years. And they haven't been there in a while. When Megan Bobie had said that in the press conference, I knew Michigan hadn't been there in a while. But for her to say she's never been to the World Series, you just kind of have to sit there and think about it, because Michigan's one of those teams you expect to be deep in the postseason annually. Sometimes they miss. But it's like, to think about Bobie and being a fifth-year senior and never having been seems almost unfathomable. I mean, at the risk of spoiling my picks later, Michigan's on my short list. I'm not saying I've got them picked to the World Series, but they're one of the teams that, like I say, is on the short list, and for me to pick to go there.
Yeah, I mean, which list? The one in the back there in your room there? I mean, your office there? You got a lot of lists in there.
6 lists on Justin's wall. I don't know which one he has Michigan on.
That's going to be this one over here that you can't see. I was prepared.
Oh, gotcha.
We'll get more back into the Big Ten and Michigan. Of course, you can't talk Big Ten. Of course, you always have to talk Pac-12. Of course, mentioned Mike Andrea's retired. And who better to bring on than a fellow Pac-12 alum, our good friend on the show, Jenna Becerra, Stanford alum, of course, Pac-12 network analyst, host of her own podcast. You're starting your 3rd season. Tell us when that 3rd season debut starts.
It's very, very soon, 5 days away, February 10th. So the same day as D1 opening day is Believe in Softball's opening day. Thought I'd keep it simple.
Wow. When will you reveal the guest, if you have a guest? Or are you going to reveal it here, or are you going to reveal it on social media?
That's a good question, because I do have a few already that we're currently, producing and getting ready to release. And I haven't historically done guest announcements and episode announcements. And so I was wondering, I was like, should I start doing that this season? I don't know. So I don't know. Let me get warmed up, and I might let you know.
All right, Vic will keep bothering you about that. We'll make this announcement. You're going to be on our episode on Monday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. Very fitting. We have you on Valentine's Day. We're going to be talking about your extensive playing career and how the podcast came about. Really in-depth interview with you on that. We had you on before the year ended, and now we're going to air that portion of the interview to talk about your career on Valentine's Day, right after the day after the Super Bowl, the day after the first weekend of softball. So make sure everybody checks that out on our podcast devices. And if you want to see the entire interview we had with Jenna, that's also on our YouTube page as well. Tell the audience where they can find your podcast.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, Valentine's Day, I love that. I mean, my first love was softball, going to be a lifetime love. So there you go. Love it. So you can find the podcast. It's in association with Believe Podcast Network, and that's spelled BLEAV. So that's where the Believe in Softball comes from. Anywhere that you get your podcasts, you can find it, as well as on YouTube. We have the video versions as well. So just search it and you're there.
Well, let's talk about a league you follow very closely in the Pac-12, because I'm really fascinated by this league this year, because there was a lot of talent lost due to graduation. Rachel Garcia, Bubba Nichols, Deja Mulipula in that Arizona senior class, Sis Bates and company. What are the things that you're kind of curious about to finding out about the Pac-12? I feel that while the traditional teams are still going to be the favorites, this could be a year where the Pac-12 is a little topsy. It could be a little wild here. Could see some surprising results, perhaps a little more wide open than usual. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the preseason poll feels right in terms of UCLA being at the top. You got Washington and Arizona, right? Then there's Oregon, Arizona State, with Stanford in the middle there. And then the rest with Oregon State, Cal, and Utah. Love that we can see it right there. I think it feels right in terms of what we know right now. I am not huge on preseason things in general in terms of awards, because I think, usually that's based on performance in the past that maybe teams were already rewarded for. But I do understand that it is key context for us going into a season. I feel like the poll makes sense for what we know right now. Like you said, a lot of things changing, but I do think that there are some exciting things on the horizon, even so. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that these rosters are bigger than they've really ever been because of COVID. So even though we had such talent that has left after in that senior class from last year and after last season, we still have some great talent that's up and coming, and even some returners that maybe they wouldn't be returning this year if it hadn't been for that COVID year, but they're still there. So yes, we lost Sis Bates. Yes, we lost Rachel Garcia. But for example, we still have Megan Framo, right? And UCLA is absolutely stacked still. Bree Perez, Maya Brady, even Tom Brady said she's the best athlete in the Brady family, right? So I think that's saying something. And then you have Aaliyah Jordan. It's still going to be a really exciting team to watch. And I think actually having a little bit more wiggle room potentially in terms of who maybe might leapfrog some of the spots that we've placed them in this preseason poll is only going to be a good thing for the Pac-12.
Nick, go ahead. I know you had a question.
Well, Jenna, I think the biggest thing going into this season for the Pac-12 is obviously the new era in Arizona. Mike Andreev's retiring, Caitlin Lowe taking over as the head coach. She brings in Lauren Lappin. Of course, you got Taryn Mowat already there. And now you have a dynamic that you brought up with us multiple times before, that every school in the Pac-12 has not only a female head coach, but a female alumnus at their alma mater. How unique is this for what we're seeing right now? And are we really going to, or how much are we really going to appreciate this as we get further along the line, but look about 3, 5, 10 years from now?
Yeah, that's right. I'm proud of the Pac-12 as an alum for leading the way with having all female head coaches. And the fact that 6 out of 9 of them, yes, they are coaching at their alma maters is impressive. I think it speaks to the conference and it speaks to the individual institutions, including the athletic departments. But to me too, I know I have some bias in terms of the fact that I came from the Pac-12, but I do think that you hear the argument a lot now too, that other conferences like the SEC, for example, are starting to overtake them, at least in recent years. We do have UCLA having won the national championship in 2019, but before that, there was a bit of a drought for 9 years. With that being said, these coaches who used to walk in those shoes as players and saw tremendous success, including national championships, like people like Taryn Mowat being the pitching coach for the Arizona staff, UCLA, I mean, Lisa Fernandez, Kelly I, right? Like Washington, Heather Tarr, like knows what it's like to compete at this level. Because of that, you have that culture sort of permeating down into the current rosters on the Pac-12, and it's only going to continue. It allows us to basically see these programs build on their tradition, but also kind of evolve as the game is evolving in all ways, not even just as players and on the field, but even in terms of facilities. For example, the SEC has really pushed the Pac-12 by them providing fantastic facilities for their teams. Now we're finally seeing those things happen in the Pac-12. And so while there's a little bit of a changing of the guard, you can still kind of marry that tradition with moving forward and progressing with this game. And I think we're in an interesting position for that in the Pac-12. It feels right too that it's now Mike Candrea Field at Hillenbrand Stadium. That feels like, didn't this happen like decades ago? Like how come this is something that just happened at Arizona? Now it feels like all is right in Tucson, and I think we're going to see more of that. Even Washington getting new facilities too. Cal even has a new facility on the horizon. Those things all play together on and off the field.
Jenna, I got a question for you. I know I have my thoughts, but I'm curious for yours. We saw that Pac-12 poll, and you had first place votes for Washington, first place vote for Arizona. Were you surprised by that? Does that kind of speak to, I'll use the word parity, which I probably overuse at times, but when you saw that, what did you attribute that to, there being first place votes kind of scattered around?
I'm not surprised by it. I think we always refer to it when I played, and I think there's still some merit to this now as it being essentially playing in a World Series every weekend, or a World Series caliber game every weekend or series. And so when you look at Washington, I mean, 2 words, Gabby Plain, right? Like we have her coming back. And not only that, I'm sorry, my lighting keeps going out here. But not only that, she also has the Olympic experience under her belt as well, which is true for a lot of folks in the Pac-12, with 20 Olympians on the rosters of 5 different countries in Tokyo this past year were able to make it and play and represent the Pac-12. So you have someone like Gabby. I think they have a chip on their shoulder as well after the seeding that happened and that whole situation with the NCAA tournament last year, like barely making it into that top 16. Like, I think there's a little bit extra something there. I don't think they're distracted by it by any means, but I do think that they have it in the back of their mind. It's impossible not to. And I would say if you even look like with Arizona in particular, that staff, like I said, it's a championship staff in terms of what they've experienced. I've said it more than once to you guys too, because that's one of the staffs that I'm most excited about seeing. I mean, with the Caitlin Lowe experience, both as an Arizona Wildcat and on the Olympic teams in the past, as well as Taryn Moat. And then you throw in Lauren Lappin, who at least I think it's a well-rounded thing because she wasn't a Wildcat herself, but she experienced the Pac-12, having been a Stanford alum, and she knows what it's like to compete at the highest level you can possibly compete in. So when you have those things lining up, and in addition to, you do have some key returners too, like Charlize Palacios, Janelle Meonio are coming back for Arizona. And then Hannah Bowen, like, let's give some credit to her. I was impressed with her in the postseason. There's a young pitching staff, and the rest are sort of underclassmen, so we'll have to see how that works. But let's not forget, like, what she was able to do for them last year. And then, you know, I just think even with Oregon kind of in that mix, you look at the fact that let's just actually take a step back. I've been impressed with just sort of the bounce back they've had in general since Mike White left. Sometimes that can really bring down teams in terms of rebuilding and needing to sort of start from scratch. But they've been really competing, and they could have had a better break in the NCAA tournament too, right? Like them going to Texas for the regional felt like a soap opera, and that's something that maybe they'll take with them as well. And then Arizona State with their offense being ranked a clean sweep of being ranked 21 also in the top 25 polls for like NFCA, ESPN, D1 softball, Softball America. They have 14 returners, including McKenna Harper, right? So with all of these things being said, I don't think you can just automatically every single vote for first place could go to UCLA. I think it makes sense that most of them did, but I'm not surprised to see a little bit of, you know, mixing it up.
Well, I'm curious about Stanford. I kind of think 6 is a little low, but maybe that's how Jessica Allister likes it, because they're always under the radar, very quiet. Nobody really knows what to expect. Next thing you know, they're in the mix. And, you know, you know that program as well as everybody. What do you expect from them? Could they be a sleeper in the Pac-12 that could make some noise and maybe be a little higher in the standings than people think, considering they bring back a lot of talent?
I think so. I mean, for the most part, I will mostly say yes to that Stanford can be a sleeper. However, in this case, I think we have real evidence to suggest that. I mean, Elena Vaughter, you cannot sleep on Elena Vaughter. I mean, she was absolutely incredible in her first couple of seasons and finally got that like full season last year in 2021. And there's a reason why she's on the Player of the Year watch list, right? Like she had a 1.54 ERA last season, 200 innings pitched, 22 wins, 156 Ks. Like she has been huge for them. And the fact now that they also have 5 listed pitchers on their roster, they have a bit of a staff. And that was something that over the last 10 years, it had been a struggle, you know, since the Missy Penna days, since we went to, or hosted, I should say, Arizona for Super Regionals in 2009. We had a couple pitchers, but didn't have more than like 2 at a time that were go-tos. Now they actually have more and more of a staff over these last years. Like think about Tatum Boyd, Reagan Krause was huge for them last year in the circle. That's huge. Like pitching in the battery is huge. Now, with that being said, losing Montana Dixon, who has been the just stalwart catcher for them for the last several years during her career, that's going to be an adjustment. She was extremely good at being able to build relationships and rapport with each pitcher, which is the art of being a catcher, is being able to manage those different personalities. But, you know, Ali Kaneshiro did kind of get to study under her and got some time last year waiting for that sort of transition. And they have a freshman too that's coming in and a third catcher as well. So when you look at all of those things, plus the fact that now it's Coach Allister's 5th season as the head coach, her 4th full season, well, you know, if we're going to think about COVID, but she actually has had an opportunity now. She's one of the best recruiters that I know. And that's not just because she recruited me. I mean, she also recruited the likes of Ashley Hansen, right? And so many other greats at Stanford too, throughout her time as an assistant coach as well. She's great at that. And the fact that she is now actually getting to see that work come to fruition, now that we're a few years in, it's truly more and more her team, her staff's team that they've built. We're seeing more and more talent as well. So I do think that 6 could be low. It makes sense when you look at, again, what we know right now in terms of Arizona State's offense, what Oregon was able to do last season, and then, of course, the big 3 with UCLA, Arizona, and Washington. But, yes, they can shake it up. They can absolutely shake it up.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I mean, Arizona State, I get why they get the benefit of the doubt, but they lost the Heckbarth sisters. You know, I kind of have questions about them. You look at, I'm not one that likes to break down every single schedule in the conference, but if you look at Arizona State's schedule in the conference, very rough as far as going on the road and the opponents they have drawn this year compared to Stanford. And I just was so impressed with Stanford. I spoke to Coach Allister at the Fayetteville region. I mean, they started late last year in February. And they were starting to peak, got to a regional final. I got to think that helps. I guess the big question for them, I'm guessing, is offensively. Where is that production going to come from? Do they have the pop? They haven't really, when she was at Minnesota, she got a Kendall Lindemann and people in the middle of the lineup. They can hit the ball out of the park and go long ball. She hasn't had that yet at Stanford. How is the offense going to look this year?
That's, I think, a good question and a little bit to be determined because – there is the potential there, like Emily Young, a shortstop for the last few years. She has some decent pop in her bat, and there are others in the lineup as well. But they are losing the likes of, they have now lost like Tegan Cowles and some other folks who had been there for several years, including on that 2019 team that really had the turnaround for Stanford in terms of, a sub 500 record in 2018, and in Allister's second year really turning it on and having the best start that they had in 10 years. So I do think that there's a little bit of a question mark in terms of that. And it's less so like, can they do it? And more so, who is going to do it? It's a who is going to step up situation. I think Coach Allister, just in terms of her style of coaching, like will allow that to be sort of an open field, right? Like she's going to see like who's delivering, who's looking good in practice, like who looks great in the scrimmages and in the inter squads, all that good stuff. And that's why we've seen some movement, for example, in the infield in terms of the lineup. Like you have Sydney Huff, you also have Sydney Steele. It's who's hitting at the time. And whoever has the hot bat, she's not afraid to make those changes. So if those two actually would be great people to step up, for example, for Stanford this year, I think Coach Allister, when I last talked to her too, is really excited about some of the freshmen. For example, I'll give a shout out to a fellow Westlake High School alum. She's from the Thousand Oaks area, in the area that I grew up in. Her name's Kylie Chung. She's really excited about her bat, for example. Seems like she can really hit the ball. And Emily Schultz, when she's on, is really good. And if we can get these folks all firing at once, I think, and you throw in Taylor Gindelsberger in that mix as well. She's really a spark plug at the top of the order. Huge change and improvement from her first year to her second and last year offensively in terms of batting average and just on-base percentage, every category. It's about making sure that all of them are firing at once. And there are a lot of options. It's just who's going to do it consistently and who's going to, and that's how you're going to solidify the lineup.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm intrigued by Stanford. I think the two teams I'm the most intrigued by is Stanford and Oregon. And Oregon, I think, is kind of a trendy pick. I know Vic likes them and Justin likes them. We were just at Missy Lombardi's presser this past week. They have a staff. They have a deeper, maybe the deepest staff she's had there, which is night and day when for her first year, where she had to depend on one pitcher, basically. But they get Brooke Giannis back. And they have Jordan Dale back, they have Dale back, and they have this young freshman staff that they really like a lot to go alongside that offense. Do you buy into Oregon maybe being a trendy pick that could make, maybe contend for a conference championship this year like they were accustomed for a while there?
I do. I mean, there's a reason why they, for several years, have been consistently performing well in terms of conference. Again, I think last season, for example, like they could have made a deeper run easily had they not been slid into that Texas regional. And I think that they're a program in terms of their culture as well and the way that they approach the game that you just can't ever really count out. I remember when I first joined the Pac-12, Oregon was really an up-and-coming program. And actually, at that point, my sophomore year, Jessica Allister went and became an assistant coach for Oregon in that 2010 season. And I think they've had a lot of great influence there. And it reminds me that I haven't actually gotten to go to the Jane, their new stadium, because they've really had a huge glow up from my days of playing against them.
You have not been there yet?
I have not been there yet. I know, it's shocking.
Vic,
we have a new hashtag.
Yeah, so Jenna, you don't understand the history of our show. We've had Kinsey Fowler, your friend, your colleague at Pac-12 Network, And her goal, what was it, Vic? Her goal was to get to the Jane.
Yes.
So we did a hashtag for over a year, get Kinsey to the Jane. Well, eventually she did. And then there was another one we did. We've helped her get to, well, no, we're full of it. She did it on her own. But we like to take credit for it. She gave us credit, so I appreciate that. So we could start a new hashtag here, Vic, don't you think? We got to get Jenna out to the Jane.
Oh, I'm all about it. Let's hashtag it up. Let's get this thing trending.
We will. See? Look. Already.
I love that.
Already.
That atmosphere, though, and for Oregon athletics overall, such a cool atmosphere to play in, and I have to say, too, their uniforms, just given the Nike relationship that they have, they're always fire, and even some of the ones where I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm like, hey, I love that they went for it, that's top notch.
Now, one thing, Jenna, I do want to ask you about, and I know we didn't have a chance to really talk about it as much, is the new implementation of the Pac-12 tournament that'll be taking place next season. So how are you feeling about the Pac-12 now going into the conference tournament and how it could eventually impact some of those teams like a Stanford, like an Arizona State, who maybe can get a couple extra wins that can maybe bump themselves
maybe even an Oregon State, a Cal type, right? I mean, right, Jenna, this maybe helps the Pac-12 give a chance to get more teams in the field, kind of like the SEC.
I think it will, absolutely. And I think this is a result of, we have the new commissioner, George Kliavkoff, coming into the Pac-12, making some immediate changes. I mean, the Pac-12 coaches, for the first time in really a long time in this way, were super vocal about wanting to get the brand out there more and have us really promoting ourselves the way that the SEC does, the way that some of these other conferences and programs do. And so even in the release, like the press release describing like what were some of the reasons they decided to make this move, it was elevate the league softball brand in advance of the NCAA tournament. So I think this addresses some of that aspect and some of the coaches' concerns. They want more things like this, a marquee event like this. Not only I think it's helpful for the brand and therefore ideally, hopefully for the NCAA tournament seedings and that entire process, but also in terms of the teams, it was a bit anticlimactic before when you have like Washington was at Stanford at the very end. I was able to call that series with Kate Scott for Pac-12 Networks. And it was a little bit anticlimactic when we're learning who the champion of the Pac-12 conference was, because everyone's just kind of in their usual regular series to the very end of the conference season. Now it's actually that extra pep in your step before you start postseason, being able to have that just competition and that level of, it's almost like a precursor to the World Series again, but it's a tournament feel that is like postseason. It's not something that they've had before. And that's something that I absolutely think, for example, really lit a fire under like Montana Fouts and Alabama last year for the SEC coming off the tournament and going straight into postseason like that. I think we saw that momentum play out. So I think that's going to be huge, both from both perspectives, just in terms of branding and getting the Pac-12's name out there a little bit more and reminding everyone like, hey, we have 24 out of the 39 national championships of all time, right? Like we are a big deal too. And then also just helping the players at the end of the day and the coaches too with that competition. So I'm excited about it. It is different. I never had that experience, but I think ultimately in the long run, I'm also excited to see that it's just next season. It's not like an announcement where, hey, 5 years from now, we're going to start the conference tournament because, then you end up just sitting around waiting. But I'm excited that it's just a year away.
Got a couple more questions before we let you go. You've been so kind to join us. Give me your thoughts on teams nobody talks about. Cal, second year, Chelsea Spencer, head coach, Utah, Amy Hogue there, and of course, Oregon State, Laura Berg, young roster there. They got maybe a pitcher that nobody talks about. It's very underrated there. Do you see any of those three that could surprise and maybe make a regional? Who do you like of those three?
I think they could. I actually think, like with Oregon State, for example, I'm glad you brought up pitching because Mariah Mazzone is the real deal in the circle. Like she had 204 innings pitched last year, 204 strikeouts. We're averaging a strikeout an inning here. Her movement, I was able to also call that series at Stanford when they came and played last year, and her movement is great. She is tough. And I remember talking to Coach Alistar about it after, and she's like, that is a legit Pac-12 Power 5 pitcher that we're facing just, in a regular series on a regular weekend. And she also hit 288. Like, that's not bad on both sides of the ball, right? Last year. So I think when you have that, I feel like, and then the leadership of Laura Berg almost doesn't even need any description or background information on that in terms of just her experience. And not just as an Olympian, but even at Fresno State too, like in her college days, having walked that same path. They get overlooked, but they compete. They really compete. And so I do think if Mazzone stays healthy, right? Like I do think that could be key for them as long as they can get the offense going. And then when you look at Cal and Utah, that was actually the first Pac-12 Networks series I called last season was Utah at Cal. And that was actually an incredibly fun series to watch. They were very evenly matched, those two teams at the time. And they ended up splitting the series, which made sense. But Utah, it's now 10 years since they joined the Pac, which is crazy to say. I can't believe it's been 10 years of the Pac-12. It's wild. But I think that after talking with Amy Hogue last season, it's tough, but they are very scrappy. They were scrappy from day one. They're scrappy now. And I think you just can't, they'll be the ones that'll steal these games. Like even if a team takes a series from them, they'll steal that third game, let's say. And it's not just, you cannot just show up and think you're going to beat Utah, even if you're UCLA, even if you're Arizona, even if you're Washington. It doesn't matter. And with Cal, with Chelsea Spencer, it's only her second year. And frankly, last year, she met her players over Zoom. It's like they didn't get a chance to really get to know each other. So I think part of that resulted in a lot of movement in the lineup and just trying to get your bearings. And she understands what it's like to be a Cal Bear and be a part of that atmosphere. But it's like, what is this team like? Every year is different, and you have to adjust in that way as a coach. And now I think this year she might be, her and the lineup and the players will all be able to settle in a little bit more. And once they do, I mean, they had some good pop in their bats too, and some good, tough competitors throughout their roster. So I do think that we'll see these teams steal some games here and there. And then when they face each other, if it's, Cal, Utah, Oregon State, when those series are head to head, it's going to be really fun.
Yeah, and that could create some differences in results as far as the league play. Washington is going to be interesting. Do they have enough pitching behind Gabby playing? They lose Morgan Flores, his base. Where's the offense coming from? I think it's a fascinating year in the Pac-12. We're not going to ask you to pick it because, you're a Pac-12 network analyst. But we will ask you this. Outside of the Pac-12, what are some of the teams that's got your eye? What do you have your eye on?
Well, I have continued to be impressed at the increasing talent in the ACC. I mean, especially with the young programs like Duke and Clemson, but then you throw in like Florida State, coming off of that second place finish last year, and even Virginia Tech, like Keely Richard last year was fun to watch. Like these are teams that I'm excited to watch, and a conference that I'm excited to watch. I would also say, how can you not be excited about Miranda Elish returning to college softball? And it's crazy because this is the third team that we're going to see her play for, right? From Oregon to Texas to Oklahoma State. And I'm usually a little bit like, whoa, what's with all the transfers? But in this case, with COVID and everything else, I'm excited. Like, I'm excited to see her in that program and see what they do with it. And then, there's always Oklahoma, right? And not only for the fact that they just won the national championship, but even like the home run chase with Jocelyn Allo. And even if there's an asterisk by it because of the COVID year and all this stuff, in some ways, I think because of everything that all these girls have had to go through throughout this COVID experience, it's almost like a more powerful asterisk or mark in that case when you call it out. And I remember Tara Vanderveer talking about that with Stanford women's basketball winning the national championship last season. It's like, actually, I almost think it's even more proud, or we feel even more proud having done it in this type of environment, just with the timing. So I think I'm also, I don't want to sleep on the Big Ten too. I do like watching them compete, especially Michigan. I know you guys were talking about that earlier, so that's always going to be interesting too. But I think it's just coast to coast. Really, I'm excited to see it all come together.
Well, we're excited to have you on the show, and we're excited to hear your podcast back February 10th. You'll be out there. Me and Vic will try to not bother you and ask you 100 times during the day, who's your guest? We'll let you decide how you want to announce that, but we look forward to you. We're fans of your show. And tell the audience one more time where they could find your show.
Yes, so you can find it anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, all the streamers, all that good stuff, anywhere you get it on audio. Believe in Softball. You can also get it on YouTube. And follow us on social, too. We have Instagram, Twitter, at Believe in Softball. So you can find us there.
Jenna will be on our podcast Valentine's Day. Very fitting. Valentine's Day. We'll talk about her journey to her broadcasting career and, of course, her playing career at Stanford. And that's the other thing we look forward to, seeing you call some games on the Pac-12 Network this season. And definitely you better promote that because we'll be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much, Jenna, for joining us here on the show.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I always love it. All three of you are great. And we'll do this again soon.
Sounds good. Jenna Becerra joining us here on In the Circle Live. And we got her and Justin on the same show. That's a big accomplishment there, Victor.
I know. The fact that we had Jenna and Justin on the same podcast is remarkable in itself. Not as remarkable as the person that we're going to be having on with Justin on an episode on Monday, but again, we'll announce that later on in the
It's true.
Y'all keep having this mess up. I'm okay being chopped liver. I promise I'm okay.
We'll announce our guests, by the way, for the podcast at the top of the hour. But let's quick thought picks Pac-12 here. Well, obviously, I didn't want to put Jen on the spot. She's Pac-12 network analyst and deal. What do you guys think? Pac-12.
I'm gonna go with UCLA, simply because I feel that they have the deeper pitching staff over Washington, who I think they have the best pitcher in the conference, and Gabby playing. What Jenna said about Washington is valid. How do you replace Flores? How do you replace the Sis Bates? And who do you have number 2 in the circle behind Gabby playing? I have more confidence in UCLA. And the way that it got eliminated last year against Oklahoma leaves a sour taste in their mouth. And I think UCLA once again reigns supreme in the Pac-12.
What do you got, Justin?
Well, I thought about picking, like Vic did, why UCLA, but I'm just going to go with straight UCLA.
UCLA,
to me, I don't think it's much of a fight. It's UCLA.
Yeah, I think there'll be a more I think it'll be a fight. I don't think it'll be.
Yeah, it'll be a fight.
But I do like UCLA. They still have talent there. Ferrame, I know there's questions. You don't just replace Rachel Garcia. However, as Coach Inouye Perez told us when she was on the podcast, they've been used to playing without Garcia the last couple of years. 2020, she wasn't with the team. She was with Team USA. Then last year, remember, she got hurt, missed some time. So they're kind of accustomed to it. I think UCLA wins. I think it's a 6-bid league. I do think Oregon, it could be dangerous. I think the Oregon's a dangerous, right? With the staff, can they have enough offense? We'll see. I like the KK Humphrey addition there from Fullerton for them. Stanford, I kind of like. Arizona, transitional year with low and young talent there. I think it's a 6-bid league. Would not shock me if a 7th team maybe materializes if they have a really strong non-conference season like deal. But I'm going to go 6 conservative, but I do like UCLA. So, that's our Pac-12. Now, let's touch on a league that Jenna's looking forward to. She mentioned the ACC. A lot of buzz about the Atlantic Coast Conference, boys. Florida State, of course, played for the national championship, but went away last year. You had Virginia Tech in the super regionals. You had Duke as a national seed. Clemson didn't host, which made one of us on this show not happy because he had Clemson as a super regional pick. But they're loaded. They bring back Valerie Cagle. Notre Dame was a win away from getting to the super regionals. Your thoughts on the ACC, Justin?
It's a strong league, and that's another one where I feel like over the last few years, I think it was the Big East, we said this earlier, growing in strength. I think the ACC is the Power 5 that's really grown in strength. And yes, it's attributable to Duke and Clemson adding softball programs. It's directly attributable. But I think you've also seen Virginia Tech grow, and you've seen Florida State stay consistent. So where Virginia Tech has grown and where Duke and Clemson have come on like banshees early on in their programs, Florida State has also stayed consistently at a high level. And by virtue of those 4 teams being strong, it's elevated the conference as a whole. And I think it's an achievement for the conference to get to that level. I mean, you had 4 teams last year that could have hosted the regional that were in the conversation, that were in those 20. And I think any 4 of them that had been picked as national seeds really honestly would have earned it. And you saw Duke and Clemson were the ones who came away with titles, with conference titles. And then you had Virginia Tech in the Supers, and you had Florida State all the way playing on the last day of the year. ACC, especially top half, is really, really strong. And let's not forget Notre Dame is sitting there too. That's a perennial tournament team every year who always makes some noise. So I really think the strength of the ACC is in their top half, and it's a really, really strong top half. I mean, if you lopped off every conference, every Power 5 conference, that top half of the ACC could hang with anybody. And I think I'm going to be really interested to see, especially how Duke and Clemson keep improving. See can Virginia Tech get to the point of, I mean, last year, think about it. Virginia Tech had UCLA on the ropes with Rachel Garcia. Like, that's not an easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think the strength of the ACC has shown itself, especially last year, and I think it's going to continue to show itself this year.
I agree. Classic, I think that classic phrase, fellas, that the rising tide floats all boats. The excellence of Florida State has forced everyone in the ACC to really take their game to another level. And with the growth of Duke and Clemson, still young programs, and the success that they've had in a recent time in the ACC. And let's not forget, we have Notre Dame, who was one win away from making it to their first ever super regional, lost twice to Kentucky and Lexington on that championship Sunday. Otherwise, they would have gone to supers. You got a Louisville team with Holly Abel, who just a few years ago, where they themselves were one win away from super regionals. You got an improving Georgia Tech program and Coach Morales. The interesting program to look for, North Carolina with Coach Papa. I think North Carolina, they were a little inconsistent last year. They got a lot of the young talent back for 2022. If they can put all the pieces together, I think North Carolina can get themselves back to being in the regionals, and then depending on the right draw, could possibly make a regional final. And Eric, get your mic on. If you have 51 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, for when Eric Lopez will have his first mute moment of the night, congratulations, you win a prize.
Well, no, I was just checking Division 2. I can't believe some of the late starts, by the way. Good. Why do you people
Mother
in
Nature 1, Division 2, 0.
Wow. Oh my goodness. All right, I'm not even going to get into that. My friend Christine Roser's first game as Rollins head coach is like a late Saturday, like 2 days later. What the hell? You used to cover this in person, Victor. How?
A lot of caffeine.
All right. Anyway,
as our good friend Justin can allude to, Dr. Pepper, the true breakfast of champions, the true nectar of the guys. Don't let these TV pundits tell you otherwise.
Anyway, all right. So while Division 2 is playing, apparently is going to play it over midnight or whatever.
The ACC, Mr. Lopez, the ACC.
Yeah, the ACC.
Let's focus, gentlemen.
I think there could be 4 teams from the ACC in the Super Regional with the right draw. I think Florida State could get there. I think Virginia Tech can get there. I think Clemson. Look, Victor, I think you were right last year, except the committee didn't agree with you.
They went to the one regional that you shouldn't go to if you want to make it to supers, and that's in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And I saw that draw, like, no.
Not that Vic's still bitter about it or anything.
No, not at all.
But you make a great point. That's going to be really interesting. Can the ACC chip away at the SEC as far as host sites are concerned? Because that could flip over. Can Clemson host for the first time? Can Virginia Tech get back to hosting? I think that could help. I think Notre Dame has hosted before. I like Notre Dame. I think they're got a chip on the shoulder. They were that close. They got doubled up by Kentucky. They bring back Holloway in the pitcher. They got Becker, a phenom freshman there. I think Notre Dame's due, and I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame actually makes their first super regional this year with the right draw. We'll see if they can get that opportunity. I think that's what I'm excited about the ACC. I think the ACC is loaded. And I think honestly, guys, this could be the first time we could say legitimately that the ACC has multiple contenders for Oklahoma City. Agreed?
Yes.
I agree. And the reason is the pitching. Cagle, Florida State, Sandercock. Duke has the 1-2 punch you like, Victor, a lot there.
Yeah, Walter is Payne St. George, yes.
Yeah. I think this league, to me, is a top 4 league right now in the sport. And I think this could be the banner year for the ACC. It comes softball there. And we'll have more on that on the Monday podcast. But I think you could have multiple bids coming from the World Series. With that being said, who do you guys like in the ACC to win the league?
I'm going to say Florida State. I think that experience that they got from last year, making it to within one game and winning the national championship, the transfers that they got coming in this year with Bethany Keene and Mac Leonard. Mac Leonard, a tremendous two-way player from Illinois State, excuse me. And the maturation of Kat Sandercock. All those things has Florida State squeaking by Clemson to win the ACC regular season.
Wow. Justin, who do you got?
I have Florida State as my odds-on favorite to make it to the World Series in the ACC, but I actually have Virginia Tech winning the conference. I'm putting some stock in Emma Limley, their freshman pitcher. I think the one thing that Virginia Tech has been missing is somebody to effectively relieve Keely Richard. I think Richard is the old school workhorse pitcher, but she still can't do it all. She can't win every game by herself. And I'm putting stock in Emma Limley. I've actually had quite a few coaches tell me some positive things about her and what she looks like, etc. So if she can prove to be an effective two to Keely Richard, I think Virginia Tech wins the conference. And to your point, Mr. Lopez, I agree. I think the ACC has a chance at getting multiple teams to Oklahoma City.
And I think that's going to speak to the parity that I think is coming within these leagues for sure. And we'll see how that goes, but we'll see. That's good there. But I'm going to go FSU. I can't see FSU going 2 years in a row without winning the ACC. I like the Vodtech pick. I like Clemson. I mean, I think it's a wide open league. I would not surprise me if you have a regular season champion and then a tournament champion be completely different. I think that's very interesting. But I'm going to stick with FSU there. But I don't have a ton of confidence because I think you can make a case for 5 teams there. I think at least 5. Yeah, I think you can make a case for 5 teams to win the league. I think a couple of sleepers, Georgia Tech, Ellie Morales, maybe Georgia Tech kind of surprises some people there. NC State, Patrick Swift, I think is a year away, but they're going to hit home runs. I think those are 2 teams that nobody talks about that maybe could sneak into the field and make the ACC a larger than a 5-team field. But I'm going to stick with 5 for now. But don't be surprised if, maybe if one of those teams, Victor likes Carolina, if they could maybe crash the party. By the way, good segue. I will have my first preseason bracketology, all right, this upcoming week on X Rating Softball. And it is 64 teams. I'm not one of these sites that's going to project 80 teams into a 64-team field. This is accurate numbers. Justin counts. He yells at me. He's like, dude, you got way too many. Nope, you got, all right. We will have 64 teams, not 80, not 76. We'll break it down each conference. You could do the math yourself. It will equal 64. There you go. I don't know when that's coming out. That's Justin's calling that.
I can verify there are 64 teams.
Thank you. That's been confirmed by source. Oh, and of course, the question will be how many from the Big 12, which is where the reigning, defending, undefeated. How would Paul Heyman describe the Sooners, Victor?
I ain't going to do it in Paul Heyman's voice, but the reigning, defending, undisputed college softball champions, the Oklahoma Sooners. And I ain't doing it in that whole Paul Heyman voice. So maybe we should get Paul Heyman on the show to do that.
He's a little busy right now, backstabbing Brock Lesnar over there. But anyway,
touche.
We'll talk Oklahoma. The defending champs. They're the favorites, the number 1 team in the country. They will play UCLA in California the first week of the season. They bring back just about everybody offensively except Nicole Mendez. Pitching is the question, but a lot of buzz about Jordy Ball. Coach Gasso told us they're raving about her. But you've got stacked teams. Oklahoma State, adding Miranda Elish, for example, adding another pitcher from Illinois State, Morgan Day, adding Julia Cottrell. They're a team at Kenny Gajewski that's been to the World Series. Then you've got Texas, who's been a win away from the World Series. They add Haley Docini in the circle, the ace from Fresno State, among other bats. Lou Gilbert coming over from Baylor. Justin, you cover the Big 12 very well. What's your thoughts on the Big 12?
Stacked, probably as stacked as they've been. I think this is the best Texas team since Mike White got there, which obviously means best Texas team in quite a few years before that too. I think Oklahoma is still just as strong as they were last year. And I think Oklahoma State, we're talking about a team coming off 2 straight World Series berths, and I think they got even stronger. I mean, you listen to the transfers, but don't forget, they also added Morgan Wynn from Kansas, a conference foe, who hit, I believe it was 17 home runs, and she was playing in the Big 12 against Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Texas, etc. So that's a big bat, another big bat for them. I really think this is the strongest the Big 12 has been. I think those top 3 are incredibly strong. All Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas, all 3 of them, I think, have odds-on favorites to make it to Oklahoma City for the World Series, not just for the Big 12 tournament. Iowa State, we saw them finally break through that ceiling to get to the World Series, to get to the NCAA tournament last year. I think they're still, even without Sammy Williams, it's still a strong team. You've got Texas Tech, Kansas, Baylor. They have they individual strengths. They've got some additions in places. You don't know what that tier is going to be made of, but I think the Big 12, especially in the top half, is as strong as they've been. And I mean, this is the first time in a long time that I feel confident in saying the Big 12 could have 3 teams in Oklahoma City, and it would not shock me even a little bit. Matter of fact, it might shock me more if they didn't.
Might be the number 2 conference in the sport by the end of the year this season.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing, guys, with the Big 12 is there probably amongst the Power 5 conferences, there is no wider gap between the top of the conference and then the second tier of the conference than what you're seeing in the Big 12. It's Oklahoma State, Texas, that 3-headed monster at the top, and then almost a Grand Canyon-like, I don't want to say Grand Canyon-like separation from the second half with Baylor and Iowa State, but it's very substantial. And to go back to what Justin talked about earlier, Oklahoma State, each of their last 2 years they went to Oklahoma City, Ken Gajewski always added a star impact transfer. Samantha Shaw 2019, Kari Abeli in 2021. Now he adds a former player of the year caliber candidate, Miranda Ellis, and she may not be asked to do as much as she was in Oregon or in Texas. Keely Maxwell in the circle had a real breakout year. You has showed some flashes in 2021 behind Eberly, and that Calgary offense led by Haley Busby and then Cheyenne Factor. Now you have Miranda Ellis as your 1A in the circle, and then you have her in a very potent lineup where she doesn't have to be the number 3, number 4 hitter to be the big run producer. And you have a Cowgirl team who not only could they get to Oklahoma City, they could do some significant damage. They could do significant damage.
All right. So is Oklahoma and of course you got the storylines with the conference realignment and Oklahoma and Texas on the move to the SEC down the road. So there'll be some extra juice, I think, in some of these ballparks. And there, with that being said, who you guys like in the Big 12? Is Oklahoma get the throne, or are you guys still going with the Sooners?
It's still Oklahoma, but it's gonna come down. It's gonna come down to Bedlam.
It's Oklahoma. It's their throne until somebody knocks them off. And I think this is probably the best chance for any of them. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Sooners too, but I think it's tight. I think it's a 4-bid league. I think Iowa State's your 4th team there. Jamie Pinkerton's done a great job, and he's going to be motivated, Victor, after the Chiefs' gaffe, that choking away a Super Bowl berth, losing to Cincinnati. I think Jamie Pinkerton and Iowa State will be inspired this season. They'll be in 4th place. Baylor lost a lot of personnel, questions pitching-wise. Texas Tech still in year 2 there with Sammy Ward rebuild. Kansas, Jennifer McFalls, they're kind of rebuild young roster there as well. But this is it's the big 3. And I do agree. I think you got 3 legitimate Women's College World Series caliber teams, which is amazing to talk about in the Big 12. So we'll see how that goes. And we'll see if we make those picks, which is still to come on this live show of In the Circle.
Still to come, yes.
We have coming up on the show, we're going to talk a little Big 10, SEC, and we're going to make our very infamous Women's College World Series picks. And, of course, we got to spin the wheel, Victor. Let's go ahead and spin the wheel. It's been a while. We got to spin the wheel here. We get another league, mid-majors, which will be in-depth on our Monday podcast. Me and Justin will go over 25 leagues conferences throughout the country on that Monday podcast. Let's see, Victor, who do we got here? We had the Big East earlier. Let's see who we get here from the wheel.
Yep, let's spin the wheel right now and see what the wheel presents to us.
Is it wrong to be a little nervous here?
No. It's not wrong to be nervous. It's anxious. Let's just say that. It's very anxious.
Really building the anticipation.
There we go. And we end up at the Summit League.
That's correct. The Summit League, won by South Dakota State last year, made the regional with Coach Krista Wood. And Justin, we both are on the bandwagon of the Jackrabbits. We both think they could be this year's JMU.
Yeah, that's my pick to be this year's JMU, as a matter of fact. I mean, I think the strength that South Dakota State has first in the circle, you've got two pitchers, Grace Glanzer and Tori Kanish, who are both rock solid. They complement one another well, and they both stuck around. And let's be honest, in the day of the transfer portal, a smaller market program like South Dakota State, keeping two ace pitchers around is no easy feat. So you've got Glanzer and Kanish in the circle. Then at the plate, you've got the likes of Kylie Halverson and Jocelyn Carrillo and so many heavy hitters. And oh, by the way, they bring all of them back. They return virtually their entire lineup. They return both Glanzer and Kanish. Glanzer and Kanish are still young. They've got multiple years left. I mean, South Dakota State is sitting pretty. They finally broke through that barrier of winning the conference. They get to the regional. They play in the NCAA tournament. And this is something I'm sure we'll talk about more in depth on the Monday podcast that we're going to record. But I really liked how South Dakota State responded to the adversity of losing early in the conference tournament, because they went in as prohibitive favorites and they lose. And it's double elimination, and they run the table the rest of the way. And to me, that spoke really well of how South Dakota State is set up, and I think it speaks really well to what they could be coming into this year, because they responded really well, really quickly to that adversity. And I think it sets them up really nicely coming into this year. That's my pick to be this year's JMU, honestly.
Victor, what's your pick? Yeah, what's your pick?
I think it's going to be interesting to see it. I think what we have to remember, the Summer League, very competitive. Even though South Dakota State won the league last year, we have to remember the Summer League was very competitive. And although the standings may not reflect it as such, the Summer League was very, very competitive. Kansas City went to Stillwater in a tournament, knocked off Oklahoma State. Omaha, who really was improving, they got themselves in a position where they could have represented the Summer League. We can't forget about Darren Mueller, North Dakota State. You got Western Illinois, Lisa Doler, her second year at the helm, trying to build back that Leatherneck program. So it's not going to be a cake and a walk for South Dakota State. If last year's tournament perfectly illustrated. But I will say, two sets of games to keep in mind for South Dakota State that could really bolster their non-conference resume. They got a pair of games, March 5th and 6th versus Wichita State in Lincoln. Then they got a midweek doubleheader, April 6th, Wednesday at Minnesota. If they split those 4 games or go 3-1, that can afford them some wiggle room come Selection Sunday. Obviously, they would prefer to get the automatic bid and make this whole conversation a moot point, but the opportunities are there for Krista Wood and her bunch.
Who do you like as potentially this year's JMU?
It's tough to say who could be JMU this year, because you have to think about the elements. You need to have a tremendous pitcher. You need to have a lot of experience, and you need the right regional, super regional matchup to help you out. But if there's a team that could potentially be a James Madison, I'm going to go to their future home in the Sun Belt, and I'm going to go Texas State. because you got Mullins in the circle, veteran pitcher. They got a tremendous lineup. And you got Ricky Woodard.
Vanderford at offensively player of the year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you got Ricky Woodard, who knows what it's like to be in the NCAA tournament. They've been close a couple times, but I feel with the competitiveness of the Sun Belt getting them ready, if Texas State, and I'm not saying that it's going to happen, they can somehow get out of the state of Texas for a regional, that will instantly boost their chances. But I think they have the makeup of a team that could, given the right circumstances and the right draw, they can, who knows? Who knows?
Well, it's a perfect way to announce who our guest will be on Monday, because our guest on Monday, not Justin, although Justin will be on the show.
Justin will be on the show, yes.
But our other guest on Monday, Vic, agrees with you sort of. She likes a team from the Sun Belt to be possibly the next JMU. And that guest is none other than ESPN's very own, our good friend, Amanda Scarborough, will join us for our annual season preview. We go over an hour with Scarborough. We talk all the national storylines in the sport. And she likes the Sun Belt a lot. There's a lot of expectations for the Sun Belt. The Cajuns, who you haven't even talked about, they've been to the World Series before, but they're in the mix. Texas State, I like them too, Vic, like you do, which may not be good news for them. But nonetheless,
oh boy,
Troy and South Alabama.
I'm gonna have to step out of the room because I'm gonna need a moment. I can't believe you just say you agree with me with Texas. I'm gonna need a moment, fellas. Talk amongst yourselves.
But yeah, there you go. So that's some of the team picks walked out. All right, he did. He meant it. He walked on the show. So that's the storylines there. Amanda Scarborough will be on the show. Justin will be with us. In fact, Justin and I will record after the show. So it's going to be a long night. But it'll be big. We'll go in-depth in every conference there. But Amanda likes teams in the Sun Belt to be the next JMU. And, of course, JMU is going to be joining them next year because they'll be in their last year in the Colonial this year. They're not eligible for the conference tournament in the Colonial. We're going to go in-depth on that, Justin, because that could affect the field 64 if the Colonial gets a second bid. JMU has got a young roster. They're rebuilding, although I still think they're going to be very good, and they're in the top 25. But those are some of the storylines, Justin, you and I will discuss on the Monday podcast. But, yeah, Amanda Scarborough in the talks there. And one of the other things Amanda and I will talk about as well is the SEC in depth and, of course, the Big Ten. And that's something we did earlier. We talked a lot about Michigan. I think we all agree. We all have Michigan winning the league, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are the other storylines you're looking forward to seeing in the Big Ten? I think one for me is how many teams do they get in the field? I think they get four teams in. I think there's questions with Minnesota without Amber Pfizer and that senior class, but they got some nice talent there. Minnesota rebrings Danielle Williams and company. I kind of like Illinois as a sleeper for that fourth team. They bring back a lot of personnel, have a strong non-conference schedule, but I think they're a team that can sneak the field. Obviously, Wisconsin, with the big move with Kayla Conwent coming back, that's significant. What's your thoughts on the Big Ten other than Michigan, Justin?
Well, I think there's actually some fun storylines in there. I mean, you see Minnesota in post-Pfizer life. You know, what is she's kind of been the face of Minnesota softball through the World Series run in 19. That's the name everybody knows. What does Minnesota look like without her? I think Northwestern's got an incredibly experienced, a really good veteran roster. And Northwestern's kind of, they had a few down years. Now they're back on in the top tier of the Big Ten. And last year they get a 4th seed in the regional. So I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a chip on the shoulder to a certain extent because they honestly, had they played non-conference, you're not talking about a 4th seed team. You're by no means. So they know that they didn't have a chance to prove that last year. So I think Northwestern's veteranship is going to be really key. And then I think there's some teams that are in a position and poised to challenge to jump up to that level. We talked about Wisconsin earlier and Kayla Conwent coming back and the value she brings to Wisconsin. You've got Illinois that seems like they're always right there. They've got some pieces in play and coming back that I think can make things interesting. Then you look at a Nebraska and an Indiana, maybe even a Maryland. Some teams that falter, that fail some. But, Maryland's got Jada McFarland, the returning Big Ten Freshman of the Year. Nebraska kind of, you never know what you're getting from Nebraska, but the one thing you are always getting from Nebraska is a competitive team. And what does the competitiveness and that kind of thing lead to? Nebraska's always in the conversation, at least. And we've seen Indiana, if you think back first couple of years of Shonda Stanton, you had an Indiana team that was incredibly good in non-conference and not great in conference. And then an Indiana team that was not great in non-conference and great in conference. And now, okay, is this the year where they finally get a chance to even that all out? This is really their first chance to do that. So I think that's another thing about the Big Ten to me. I think you still got Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern towards the top. But then I think underneath them, you've got 4 or 5 teams that could jockey for some solid position and could make things really interesting. I think you've got some other teams that are still going to struggle, that are still going to, you're going to have to the big Big Ten teams, no pun intended, might have to watch for some trap games in there. But I think that top tier is still going to be the top tier. I think that second tier though is what may be most interesting to me, just because I think there's so much that could happen on that second tier with, like I say, maybe 4 or 5 teams even.
Yeah.
It's the one thing about it with the Big Ten is that it always seems a team comes out of nowhere from the Big Ten. I don't know if that's going to be the case this year. I wanted to say Iowa, but you lose your top 2 pitchers in Allison Ducey and Lauren Shaw. Shaw transferring over from to UCLA, so that's a big loss for Coach Gillespie and company. So I think Iowa could be a team. They got Brianna Vasquez.
Well, their window for the tournament, I think if they would have had a normal year, they would have been in 20 and 21. They were the 4th best team in the Big Ten. If they would have had that non-conference slate, I think they would have gotten in. That being said, by the way, I think the committee treated the Big Ten pretty fairly. I know that's not a popular opinion in the Midwest, but you chose not to play a non-conference schedule.
Exactly.
You chose that. The league did, not the coaches for the record.
The league made the decision, not the coaches.
Right. Everybody else did. Everybody else pretty much did. So I think they got treated fairly, honestly, from that standpoint. I mean, some people wondered if Northwestern should have even been in last year. That being said, I think Iowa, unfortunately, they got hurt by that because you're right. They're kind of young this year. A kid to watch is Denali Lecker. She's going to be their number 2 pitcher behind Brianna Vasquez as their best bat. But I think they're a year away. Most of their staff is young. I think they're a year away. I personally like Illinois out of that second tier group. I think Indiana, can Shonda Bell, that pitching coach, develop a pitcher quick enough in Indiana? Maybe they've kind of been knocking on the door a little bit. Wisconsin, I think, Yvette Healy's only had, I think, 2 losing seasons in her career as head coach. So they usually tend to bounce back. And then Nebraska. I like Nebraska to bounce back a little bit too. Remember, they had a good season going. They kind of faded at the end of last year. But I think they got a lot of experience back up, and I think they get consistent pitching. I think Nebraska could be in that mix for that 4 through 6 slot. But Michigan's the team to beat. They're the team. That's the storyline there in the Big Ten. Now, before we go into the SEC, Vic, what do we do? Let's just spin the wheel one more time here before we go into the SEC.
One more spin of the wheel? Certainly. Let us spin the wheel one more time and see what magic it unfolds for all of us. Here we go, fellas.
I feel like this only could have been made better with a drum roll.
No.
Oh, the Horizon League. Wow. Okay. Justin, it's all yours.
I mean, I like the Horizon League, honestly. I mean, yes, we're talking about a 1-bid league. We're talking about a league where the conference tournament champion is who gets to the tournament. But I think the interesting thing about the Horizon League, for a few years you have an Illinois Chicago where, okay, it's pretty much their league to lose to a certain extent. You have you have Kayla Wadle in the lineup, well, player of the year, et cetera. You know what you're getting there. Well, then last year you go in and Youngstown State actually had a really nice year. Youngstown State had a nice year, and they actually returned Ellie Buffenbarger to lead them in the circle. I really like Buffenbarger, honestly. Kid's got a good story and a better arm. But then also you've seen Oakland rise up a little bit. You've got Sydney Campbell in the circle up there, and you've got some really, really solid offensive weapons on that Oakland team. So the interesting thing I think about the Horizon League this year is UIC, Illinois Chicago, was the favorite for many years. Now they lose Kayla Wadle. She joins the coaching staff. So you've got UIC kind of sitting there. They know how to win in the postseason. They proved it again last year in the conference tournament. Oakland is rising, and they actually made it to the conference tournament championship last year, just couldn't finish the job. And you've got Youngstown State that won the regular season, then made a swifter than expected exit from the conference tournament. So the thing about the Horizon League, and then you've got, for instance, a Green Bay team that actually has gotten better. So I actually like the depth of the Horizon League. I think there's a few teams who could challenge. And when you have a good few teams, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what can come out of it. And you've got some really solid arms. And so I'll watch the Horizon League pitching. There you go.
That's impressive. That's the kind of analysis you'll get on the Monday podcast. I'm not sure we're going to go into the Horizon. In fact, I'm going to make a call right now. We won't talk Horizon on the Monday show because we're not going to be able to top that breakdown right there. So,
No.
So Victor, make sure on our Monday podcast for the Horizon fans to make sure they click on our archives if they when they get mad if we don't talk Horizon on the podcast, is because we talked about it on the live show. So,
got it.
Because there's always that one mid-major league we don't talk about on the podcast. We'll talk on the live show just to keep it interesting there. And apparently the Horizon. Let's spin the wheel one more time. I can't believe I dropped on the Horizon League, but that was incredible analysis. I can't add to anything like that more. That's unbelievable. I will see Oakland. I'm scheduled to see Oakland in person.
Yes.
So I'll definitely need to pick your brain more, Vic, Justin, there as we get closer.
By the way, a sleeper team to keep an eye out for, Robert Morris. They finished third. They finished fourth in the league last year, 25-19 overall. They were 6 games over 500 in league play. So if you want a team that's not those three, Robert Morris could be your ticket.
Wow. Give me another Give me another spin of the wheel before we go SEC here.
You want another spin of the wheel, says Mr. Lopez. Okay, here we go.
We can't end it on a Horizon League. I mean,
oh, don't worry. We'll get
warmed up now.
Yeah, seriously, Justin's just now he fired. That was impressive. Oh,
well, you were just talking about this conference earlier, Mr. Lopez.
Well, obviously, the big storyline here is James Madison. This was their last year in the Colonial. They're going to move to the Sun Belt in part because the Colonials made JMU ineligible. So now, as a result, for JMU to make the field, they're going to have to make it as an at-large. That opens up a spot for the automatic bid in the conference tournament, which will be held in Elon. And this is going to create a lot of chatter. I personally think that JMU, I'm going to trust Lauren Laporte and her staff. They know what they're doing. This just in. So I think they're going to get in as an at-large, which I think is going to take a spot away from somebody else, probably a mid-major, a Missouri Valley, something like that. Justin is not as sold, though, on JMU. Give me your thoughts here. You think they could be had in the CAA?
I think they could be had. I mean, don't get me wrong. JMU has, and Duke's fans send hate mail on Twitter, so I won't see it, and that gives me a good reason not to respond to it. There's no disputing it's not as strong of a JMU team as it was last year. It's not close. You don't have Odyssey. You don't have Kate Gordon. You don't have Sarah Jubas. Those were humongous pieces of not just that World Series run, but over the last 5 years of JMU softball. I mean, Gordon, the home run record holder, Jubas and Gordon both as clutch as they come. Odyssey, I mean, she's a household name now. You don't have any of this. It's not as strong of a JMU team. Now, they're still playing a strong non-conference schedule. They'll still have opportunities to grab marquee wins, to grab wins that they can put on their resume for the postseason. But when it comes down to it, if the committee's looking at James Madison versus a fifth team from the Big Ten or a fourth team from the Big Ten, I just don't know how that's going to shape up. Now, if James Madison maybe, runs the table in the conference and wins the regular season and doesn't lose any, okay, well, then it's a different story. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I think JMU can lose a few games. I think there's a possibility. We saw an Elon pull off a game from JMU last year, and that was that strong JMU team I talked about, the one that went all the way to the World Series. You've got a Delaware that's been building the last couple of years. Yeah, the matchups with JMU in the tournament last year weren't great, but that's still a Delaware team that's improved year over year. You've got a Drexel team that did well last year and returns a couple of their big pieces. So I think there's a chance that JMU loses a couple of games in the conference. And when you look at the resume, come tournament time, the committee says, well, they don't pay attention to who the teams are. Now, do they pay attention? Sure, it comes into play. And JMU coming off a World Series berth and missing the tournament next year is not exactly a sexy storyline. But I don't think it's a given that JMU is a tournament team. I think they could be, and I'm not necessarily saying they're not, but I don't think it's a given. I think they've got to do the work to get there since they have to be an at-large this year.
And Eric has himself on mute for the second time this evening.
Well, I'm just watching. I just watched Alabama get trounced by Kentucky.
Only
there,
two?
so. Yeah, there you go.
Wolf.
But I in basketball. Why does Alabama care about basketball? They're a softball school. Anyway, it's
Send your tweets to @Eric Lopez Elo, ladies and gentlemen.
Whatever. We'll get to the SEC in a moment, but look, if JMU wins the regular season, you're going to deny them of a spot in the tournament because they're not allowed to play in a conference tournament. Now, I do think they have to do something in the non-conference, but I think they do, and I still think they have the best pitcher in the Colonial that people forget because she didn't get a lot of innings in postseason because Odyssey took over. But they got a Humphrey. To me, Justin, who in that Colonial which team has a pitcher that can match and beat JMU when it matters? Because there was nobody close to JMU's pitcher. We can focus all we want about the offense, but JMU has always been successful because of their pitching, going back to Jalen Ford, to Megan Good, to Odyssey Alexander, and I think they got another one in their staff in Humphrey.
She probably is the best pitcher in the Colonial, but I think beating JMU takes on a different recipe this year than it did last year and the years past. I think it's a young JMU team. You don't have the known power bats. So I think beating JMU looks different than it has in past years. The recipe to do that is not the same recipe that it's been the last few years, certainly not the same one it was last year. And I think Humphrey probably is the best pitcher in the conference. And without insult to Alyssa Humphrey, knowing she's that good, I don't think that's saying as much as it has been in past years either, though.
Well, I think we're going to continue this debate here on the podcast. So we're not, we could spend more time on this. By the way, the Colonial is a sham. It's a joke what they've done there. I think they'll be a 2-bid league, but I think they'll be kind of a 1-bid league for the rest of time once JMU leaves next year. And I know we'll get into this on the podcast. There's another team that got screwed in Stony Brook, who's changing conferences, and they're not eligible for their conference tournament this year. And I know that's got something that you're upset about, Justin. We'll get into that on the podcast because we have to talk about this conference, the Southeastern Conference, which, poor Southeastern, they never get a lot of coverage. So we figure we give them a few minutes, I think, to talk a little SEC.
No.
So let's,
out of the goodness of our hearts, yes.
Let's talk SEC here while we have a chance.
Did you say SEC?
Yeah. It's a pretty good league, last I heard. They got 12 teams in last year. And of course, Alabama, the favorites there. What are you guys' thoughts, Victor? What's your thoughts on the SEC here going into 2022?
Is it just me or is everybody underrating LSU this year? Let's remember, with a relatively young roster last year, they earned a hosting bid, hosted Supers before losing 2 straight to Florida State, both very competitive games. They have a bulk of their team back led by Taylor Pleasance. Their pitching is going to be much improved. And I think LSU is going to have a chip on their shoulder, seeing the preseason rankings, both in the SEC and in various outlets and platforms. And also the fact that they saw Georgia make it to the World Series, people talking about Arkansas winning the regular season, talk about Alabama's run to the Women's College World Series in Montana Fouls, and Missouri with Larissa Anderson, the breakout year that they had last year in Como, and not a peep was mentioned about LSU, except for the fact that they played one of the most brutal, if not the most brutal, non-conference schedule in all of college softball, and it's probably going to rival that again this year. So I'm very bullish on LSU. And if for nothing else, I want to make sure that my rivalry with my frenemy Nick Torino is one of a friendly banter and doesn't escalate to anything else.
Justin, what stands out to you about the SEC? Which storyline you're intrigued by in the SEC?
I think there's a lot of them actually. LSU is an interesting one. I think we know Alabama's got Montana Fouts. What does their offense look like? I know some people say, well, Arkansas was a one-year wonder. I don't think so, but I want to see how Arkansas comes out and proves whether they are or not. I think you see a Florida, and Tim Walton's teams always win. but that's a weak Florida team to me. So what do? You get a Missouri and a Tennessee that were close last year in terms of seedings. They were top teams. Tennessee obviously loses in the regional. Missouri loses a game away from the World Series. I think there's actually a lot of storylines in the SEC for me. You got some new faces at the Arkansas and the Tennessees, a couple of new faces down there in Alabama. And I think it's going to be – obviously it's going to be another interesting year in the SEC. But there's a lot of storylines actually with probably half the league that intrigue me.
One that jumps out to me, I'm going to get to see in person. Tony Baldwin in his first game as head coach at Georgia, taking over for Lou Harris-Champer. They're going to open in Orlando against UCF on Thursday night. Minnesota's in that tournament, Fresno State, Longwood as well. How does Georgia know Mary Wilson-Avent, who takes over in the circle? They got a lot of talent, though, offensively. They're going to score runs, but I'm intrigued to see how they look. I'm intrigued by Tennessee, adding Aaron Edmondson and company. But, of course, that's Alabama. Montana Fouts, arguably the face of the sport. Probably the co-favorites alongside Jocelyn Allo. When you guys agree for Player of the Year, National Player of the Year right now?
I picked her as my Player of the Year last year, and she hasn't done anything to get me off of that for this year. But one thing I will say, how do they replace a Bailey Hemphill in the middle of that order, and how do they replace the defensive steadiness of KB Sides who transferred to Arkansas? That's the two things that I'm going to look for from Patrick Murphy's team. And we're going to find out early on in the season because Alabama, they got themselves a tough test to start things off in 2022.
Yeah, they go to Arizona, playing in Caitlin Lowe's first game there, to say the least. All right, who do you guys like in the SEC? Everybody's going quiet here. All right, I'll go first. I'm going Florida.
Go first. Yeah, you making us go first so much. Why don't you go first this time?
I'm going to go Florida. They host the SEC tournament. I think they win the SEC tournament this year. Everybody just wants to ignore Florida. Oh, ho, ho, Florida. All they do is win the regular season every year in dramatic fashion. I'm going to go Florida. They got Hightower back. They got Lugo back. They got a young freshman, exciting, touted freshman pitcher on the staff, Debris. They got Charlotte Eccles, who I think will be the SEC Player of the Year if she doesn't split votes with Hannah Adams. I think you got that 1-2 punch. I think Florida is very good. I think Alabama's right there. I think it's Florida. Look, I know Arkansas won the share of the regular season title, and I think they're legit too. But it's usually Florida or Alabama. One of them gets a piece of the trophy. I could see an Alabama winning the regular season and Florida winning the SEC tournament in that regard. But I do like Tennessee and LSU. I agree with you, Victor. I think LSU is undervalued. I think Tennessee is stacked. I think Missouri, how we've not brought up Missouri. They basically bring back everybody. They were a win away from the World Series. I think you talk about that. That's a top heavy lineup there in the SEC. Who do you guys have?
I will go with Alabama. And I got Florida right slightly behind them. I got LSU right behind them. 3-team race.
Ooh. Okay. Am I up now?
Yeah, you're up. Wow, Justin looks a little phased by that. He was like a little thrown off by your picks there, Vic.
Three-team race with no Arkansas threw me for a minute there. I mean, I'm going to go Alabama to win. Yes, it's a safe pick. It's a safe pick. Don't get me wrong. I get that. But you've got Montana Fouts, number 2 player in the extra elite 100 college player rankings. Plug.
Cheap pop.
But it's hard to pick against Montana Fouts. You bring in Allie Shipman to replace Bailey Hemphill. No, she's not going to hit 25 home runs, but she's effective. She's a solid bat. I think you make up for the absences well enough. You get the Bailey Dowling back, the Jenna Johnson's in full speed, that kind of thing. I think you're okay if you're Alabama. So I'm going to pick Alabama. I mean, I think it's Alabama's conference. I'm still a little wowed by a 3-team race with no Arkansas, but we'll save that one for another day.
It took an hour and a half finally. You and Vic on a different page here finally. I smell. Are you guys got a little Arkansas? It sounds to me. So what do you got? You got Arkansas as a top 3. What do you got?
I do. Yeah.
I got Arkansas.
For me, it's
I got
Alabama.
Arkansas
I got Alabama
forward.
winning it.
Okay. So
I mean, I think Alabama. I think Arkansas just reloaded at a level where I think they're going to be still up at the top. That's my pick here.
Okay. All right. SEC. Of course, the question is how deep will they go in postseason? Let's go ahead now. Before we make our postseason picks, let's announce where everybody's going to be this week, first weekend. I will be in Orlando for the UCF calling these games at UCF there with a tournament on ESPN Plus. UCF Georgia Thursday night opener. You got Friday UCF Minnesota. You got Fresno State in the field. You got Longwood. That's where I will be. Vic, you and Justin are going to be in the similar. Vic, you got a more complicated schedule than me. Where you got to be all over the place.
Yeah. So Thursday I will be in this. I will be in the stadium watching the UCF Georgia game, and then Friday I'll be making my way to DeLand to call the first games of the Shelley Robinson era for Stetson. They take on Georgia State and Delaware, who I think will challenge for the Colonial title. You can watch those games on ESPN Plus. And then Saturday and Sunday, I'll be going to Leesburg, joining Justin to watch the Northern Lights Southern Knights tournament. And I'll be calling 2 games Saturday and Sunday on that website. Go to thespringgames.com for the schedule. And by the way, the games that I'll be calling on those days on Saturday, you want to talk about marquee games on Saturday, I will be calling on Saturday Missouri versus Virginia Tech at 6. And then at 3:30, I got Missouri versus Wisconsin. That's Saturday in Leesburg. Go to thespringgames.com for more details and where you can watch those games.
Justin, where are you going to be?
Leesburg, Florida, all week. I get to spend a nice 10-day jaunt in the Sunshine State, starting Leesburg, and then a quick trip up to Orlando, and then down to Clearwater to start the year. So I feel as long as y'all are done with those 30, 40-degree temperatures, I don't know that there could be much better than spending the first 2 weeks of the regular season in Florida. As long as it's the actual Sunshine State again, I'm set.
Well, I'll allow Justin to give you an update on the weather conditions for Florida to give you your weather on the 7s, your weather on the 7s here on our.
While Vic looks up the weather, which game are you coming to for Orlando for the audience there?
UCF Liberty. I believe it's Tuesday night. That's opening week.
Right. Sneaky good game on that Tuesday.
I don't know who might be broadcast for that game, but.
I heard
it won't be me. I know that much. It might be. I think it's someone like down.
Won't be me either.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, it's me. I take every game, one game at a time. One game at a time. I go one game.
That guy right there.
There you go, me. That'll be a fun one. Dot Richardson and company, right? That'll be a good one. Dot cover the homecoming there, and then I know you both will be out to Clearwater too for the ESPN Elite Invitational. Amanda Scarborough will be there as well. She'll be calling the action. She'll be on our guest Monday. We'll preview the season. We'll talk about the Big 12, the SEC, much more in depth, as well as the Pac-12 and the ACC and some of the teams that she likes in sleepers. And then Justin will be on that show. We will talk American softball. The wheel has screwed the American here. We did 3 spin the wheels, and there was no.
We did 4. We did 4.
And no American picks at all. We will talk in depth. I mean, come on.
The wheel shows no favoritism. It doesn't have any bias.
Well, that's okay, because me and Justin will have a feeling we'll go in depth in the American.
Horizon League softball.
Yeah, they did. I still can't believe that. I can't believe that. That and Justin with a heck of a breakdown. We will have a lot of American Conference content, though, this week. We mentioned the Monday show will be the season preview show. We will talk American among 25, 26 conferences.
Yes.
That's probably going to be over a 2-hour show. And then we'll have Ken Erickson and Cindy Ball Malone, USF and UCF head coaches, this week on the podcast.
So follow our social media, and we'll have a revised schedule with opening day being Thursday for D1. We'll have a revised schedule. So follow us on our social media channels to find out when our podcast will be coming out with Coach Erickson and Coach Ball. All right, gentlemen.
Did you find out the weather for Justin?
Yes, the weather, Justin, for this upcoming week. It's going to be it's going to be a high of 72 on Friday, 73 on Saturday, and it'll drop to 71 on Super Bowl Sunday. Maybe a little chilly in the morning, so bring a light jacket or light coat to kind of cover you in the morning, but otherwise, you'll be fine.
I'll take it.
Okay, I'll take it. All right.
All right, gentlemen. We've waited long enough.
I'll take it.
We've talked about the teams. We talked about the players. We talked about the conferences. It is now time to make the predictions that we will make us look like geniuses or, more often than not, make us look like dopes. It is time to make our picks for which teams will be joining us in Oklahoma City for the Women's College World Series this year. By the way, revised schedule for the Women's College World Series. Got an extra day between the semifinals and the championship series.
Scarborough and I will talk in depth about that and on some of the other rule changes and some of the storylines off the field in softball. That's on our Monday podcast.
So remember, gentlemen, the picks that we make will be held against us in the court of public and private opinion and all over social media. So let us make our picks accordingly. Mr. Lopez, you have the honor of going first.
Well, let's go with in this perspective. Does everybody here have Oklahoma in?
Yes.
Justin? Yes. Okay. So we all have Oklahoma in. Does everybody have Alabama in?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Justin's nodding
yes.
yes.
So Justin's nodding his head in agreement.
All right. So far we have 2 agreements, 2 for 2 there. Does everybody here have UCLA? Both of you are nodding.
3 for 3.
Okay.
I don't like where this is starting.
Well,
I don't like where this is starting.
I think that's.
I don't like it.
Well, we'll see if this changes. So I think the only reason I did that exercise is I feel like that's the 3 safe picks that everybody's going to pick, right? Like, I think if people are going to either pick Oklahoma to repeat, or if you're not, you're probably going to pick Alabama. It's probably going to be the second choice. And then I think UCLA will always have the West Coast benefit of the doubt deal there. So I'm not surprised that the 3 of us agree on those 3. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Where does it go from here? Justin, you go first.
Oh, no pressure or anything.
No.
Okay, so got those 3. Oklahoma State for me was a 4th easy one. That I had 4 easy ones right off the top. I think Oklahoma State, they're on a run of 2 straight. You got Ellis, Cottrell win. So for me, Oklahoma State was number 4. Then it got tougher. Then it got a lot tougher. I have lost much sleep. I have more gray hair. It got really difficult after the top 4. So in no particular order, and with 2 very big snubs, I went Texas, Florida State, LSU, and Arkansas.
Pretty good. Who are the 2 teams you left out?
Michigan and actually, believe it or not, Virginia Tech were 9 and 10 for me.
Victor, how do you follow that? Look at that. He's shocked. Victor's stunned. He's stunned.
So you didn't even have Washington on consideration. You didn't have Arizona in consideration. And you have 3 teams from the Big 12. And you have 3. Wow. Okay. So I agree with you, Justin, on LSU and Florida State. Where I disagree with you is your SEC pick. I got Florida instead of Arkansas.
Wow. Woo-hoo! Double it up. I like it.
And I'm riding the Coach Hutch bandwagon. I'm going Michigan to make it back to Oklahoma City. Eric, Eric, please do not tell me that my 8 are the
No, we don't have it. No, we don't.
You have me worried when you had that look. You have me legitimately worried when you made that look, sir.
No, I just thought I was going to be the only one with Michigan. And we both have Michigan. I like Michigan. I like Michigan a lot. They got the 1-2 punch. I think there's motivation. There's to get Hutch back to the World Series. She's going to be the all-time leader in Division I wins. I think this group that's been there forever, I think they're motivated. They have the pitching. I think they will end up being a host. I think they will be a national seed. I think they will win enough in non-conference. They're going to open in Tampa like they always do with South Florida and Florida, so we'll get some ideas there. But I like Michigan. I like Michigan, as a matter of fact. It's my fourth team there. I think Michigan could sneak in that way. I like Michigan a lot, Victor. You and I are on the same page on Michigan, which has me worried.
I know.
That's got me nervous there. So I've got Michigan in there. I have Arkansas. I'm with you, though, Justin. I'm on the Razor. I think they've been knocking on the door. They ran into a team of destiny in Arizona last year. I think Courtney Deifel told us that. I will side with you. I have Arkansas in the World Series as well as my fifth team there. And then I will go with Texas as my team. I think Texas, as the great Joe Testator would say.
Oh gosh, you in this obsession with the Joe Testator quote, which has been more relevant about softball than it has been about football.
I'm going with Texas. I think they got the enough arm. I think they get a little payback on Oklahoma State. Could be an interesting deal if they match up together. Remember, the committee tends to like to put these teams in the same conferences in the Super. So that's why I don't think there's going to be 3 in the Big 12. I think there'll be 2 in the Big 12. I think my SEC teams are Alabama, I think, are in. I think Arkansas is in from the SEC. I have UCLA in. I got Michigan in. So where am I? 6? Is that 6?
You're at 6. You got 6. You need 2 more, sir.
Oh, boy. I'm going to go Virginia Tech. Pete DeMoore has been knocking on the door. They were in the regional final in Lexington in 2019. They got to the 1 game away from the World Series in UCLA. They got Keely Richard, 14 years to the day of Angela Tincher leading the Hokies to the World Series. I think Keely Richard makes that move and gets there as the 7th team to make the field in the World Series. And then my 8th and final team will be Florida State. It's a Florida team. That was hard, man. That's hard. Going 2 ACCs. Going 2 ACCs. It was not easy. Could go Florida State, because I could see Florida State and Florida paired up in the Supers. Don't be surprised if that happens.
Well, yeah, because heaven forbid the committee has an original freaking idea.
But I think you can make a case for like 15, 16 teams here.
You could. You really could. You really and truly could.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people in Tennessee and Brian Rice are going to start Twitter feuds with us now because of this. There'll be some people in Seattle, Washington aren't going to be happy. People in Tucson, Arizona are not going to be pleased with us right now.
There'll be a lot of people. But trust me,
Colonial, Missouri is going to be Lopez and Anderson is going to be ticked off, and I'll have to deal with that when I go see her on Saturday in Leesburg.
Listen, this is folks. Keep in mind, we were the same folks last year that didn't have Oklahoma in the national championship series.
We are same dopes.
We might be.
That's what I said. Take our picks with a grain of salt. After Coach Gasco was on the show and told us she had a good feeling about this offense.
Yep, Justin, you were going to chime in.
No, I was just going to add an extra prediction. I think the ACC will get the SEC treatment this year and have an all ACC super regional.
Agreed.
I
agree. And I think you could see it could be Virginia Tech against a Clemson, could be Virginia Tech against a Florida. You're right. I think there's going to be a lot. I think you're going to have a lot of upset people about the super regional pairings for sure. So for sure on that. All right. Before we make our national championship pick, player of the year.
Ooh.
I'm going Fouts.
Don't.
In fact, I'll go Fouts. Alu is my top two. With my third one being I'll go Gabby Plain as my I won't go her. I'll keep Gabby Plain third. I'll go Gabby Plain.
Is that your final answer?
For now. Well, for now. Ask me in 10 minutes.
All right, Chris Berman.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay, Vic, you go next. I'm still deciding here.
Wow.
Aloe, Fouts, Megan Bobain.
Bobian, good pick there. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to be slightly less original and slightly more original. I'm going to say Fouts, yes. I'm going to actually say Tiara Jennings because I think she's going to get more opportunities to hit. And she didn't exactly not get opportunities last year, but I think you're going to see Aloe pitched more around this year. I think there's going to be some people who don't want to be the Mike Baxick to Jocelyn Aloe's Barry Bonds.
Wow.
So I think
what a reference.
Hey, you pull out 14 years ago Angela Tincher, I'm going to pull out Barry Bonds here. But then I'm actually going to go on the strength of picking Arkansas to the World Series. I'm going to go Mary Happ as my other one because I think they're going to beat somebody. I think if Arkansas gets to the World Series, I'm doubling down. I'm going to say Happ's going to be why they get there, so she ends up in that final three.
That's pretty good. All right, who's playing for the national championship and who wins it all, Justin?
Oh, I get to start again? Oh.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, that was Vic's deal. Vic said he was only going to produce this live show if you went first. So that way you did not. That was his deal.
Since when did I agree to those terms? And I didn't even say it.
All right.
So I'm going to be a little interesting here, and I'm going to say it's an all Big 12 national championship final. I'm going to say Oklahoma and Oklahoma State.
Woo! Bedlam! Oh my, that will be definitely Bedlam with exclamation points. Oh,
Hall of Fame Stadium rocking for the week. That's now. Am I very confident in that? No, because I think there's a lot of teams. There's good parity, but that's where I'm going to pick. If I'm right, we'll hear about it. Oklahoma. I think Bedlam makes for a good series. I think they go 3 games, but I think Oklahoma pulls through.
Woo! Woo! Oh man, can Oklahoma City hold that?
I've got to throw something out there memorable.
Go ahead, Victor. Follow that.
No.
Vic?
No Justin, way. I hate you.
No way. Are you both agree?
I was going to go with Oklahoma State. Full disclosure, I had it written down. Oklahoma, I had this set about X number of teams from the same state play for the national championship. X number of teams from the same conference play for the national championship. No teams from the same conference in the same state ever played for the national championship until this year. And then Justin had to steal my thunder. To that I say, bravo, sir. A.K.A. Oklahoma State. I will go with what should have been the national championship game last year, which is Oklahoma and Alabama. What?
So you change your pick because Justin makes the pick, so now you're going to take my pick. Go ahead. Unbelievable. Good Lord.
Live podcast ain't nothing like it, folks. Where wrestlers steal each other's finishers. Here we steal each other's picks.
Go ahead.
Oh my goodness!
So you're going Oklahoma, Alabama.
Yes, Oklahoma, Alabama.
And who's wins?
Now would be the time, Mr. Lopez, to pick Arkansas and Virginia Tech.
Yes.
Wow. All right.
Yes.
That could be wild.
Have the courage of your convictions, as Skip Bayless likes to say.
Wait, who are you picking? Who are you picking to win it all?
At the risk of waking up my roommate, who has to be up in 5 hours.
Okay.
Roll Tide! Bama wins the championship. Eric.
I'm so glad I went first.
So for those of you who are joining us late, Justin stole my pick. So Justin stole my pick. Okay? He stole my pick. So I had to revise and steal his pick. And he just walked out the room because he now has no idea what to do because he doesn't want to mirror what I just said.
Come on. Arkansas, Virginia Tech.
I had this whole storyline, boy.
No. Michigan, Florida State. Go Michigan, Florida State, Eric.
I do think Michigan could be a Final Four type team. Remember, like football was. So I will say. But I did have Oklahoma, Alabama. And I had this vision, gentlemen, going the third game of the series. And there's rain in the forecast. Misty rain. Now remember,
I'm walking off now.
It's gonna be.
I'm walking off now.
The series is supposed to. What's game 3, Justin? When is it scheduled to be? What is it? It's the Thursday now.
Friday.
I think it's it's Friday.
Well, now there's going to be some weather, and now the controversy is: do you play through the rain? Do you not play through the rain? It's starting to drizzle. The band.
Hey, by the way, Eric, this storyline is probably better than some of the crap that's going on in WWE right now. But proceed.
That's not saying much. And it's starting to have some misty rain. Bama, it's a wet ball. They want to play, but because of the expanded schedule, so we don't play. They play the next day. Oklahoma wins. I just changed the script. I was going to pick Alabama in fairness, but Victor picked me.
That truly is like WWE storytelling.
10 years ago, Alabama beat Oklahoma in that misty
dancing in the rain. I know.
I could see that again, and Victor will be in the press box trying to change his flight. And Justin.
No, because I'm leaving.
So you could miss the conclusion of game 3 for the second year.
No, because I'll be flying out Saturday regardless.
Well, hopefully it doesn't get to a Saturday finish. I can't believe it.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, clip this because if for some reason that happens, I want you to flood Eric Lopez's mentions on Twitter at Eric Lopez Elo.
We have an expanded. I'm just saying we have an expanded field, so you don't have to play through the rain anymore, right? Right? Like 10 years ago. We can avoid that.
At Eric Lopez Elo, ladies and gentlemen, if that situation does come to fruition,
I can't believe what happened here. You changed your pick because Justin picked it. You take my pick away. Unbelievable.
How are we supposed to? Look.
I could see Michigan crash the party with the 2 pitchers.
They could. They really could.
Let me just throw that out there. Yeah.
I didn't pick Michigan to the World Series, and yet I could see Michigan crashing the whole party.
No, in all seriousness, I think this is the hardest year to pick the 8 teams, to be honest. I think
and for full disclosure, ladies and gentlemen, on NCAA.com, Michaela Chester made her 8 picks. She has Alabama, Oklahoma State, UCLA, Michigan, Florida, but has Mizzou and Washington.
Could happen.
That's not out of the realm of possibilities either.
No, I think there's a lot of different combinations this year. So I would be, put it this way, I would be shocked if any one of the 3 of us get all 8 teams correct. I think it's that wide open.
Yeah, that happens. About a lottery ticket on the way to the World Series.
Yeah, and you can split that 3 ways, Justin. We would greatly appreciate it.
All right, well, that'll do it for this edition of In the Circle live show. Unless you want to do spin the wheel one last time, Vic.
No.
You worked hard on that.
We've tempted fate too much for one Saturday night, gentlemen.
All right. Keep it on In the Circle here. YouTube, subscribe. You can catch the replay of this. Make sure you like us. We'll have a lot of original content here on the YouTube. Also, our podcast Monday. Amanda Scarborough will join us. We'll talk in depth about the preview of the season, some of the rule changes in the sport, like instant replay, will be discussed as well, and much, much more. And we'll also talk to Justin. Me and Justin still have to go after this show. Victor's going to go.
Have fun. Y'all have fun with that one. I'll be over there on my couch watching some reruns of Match Game.
Me and Amanda.
Y'all have fun with that.
Me and Scarborough have over an hour. We're going to talk about the preview of the major conferences. Will Justin and I go over that? We'll find out Monday morning. We're going to go through all the mid-major conferences that the wheel did not spin at. I still can't believe the Horizon breakdown. We'll break down every line.
The wheel has no bias or favorites.
So make sure Monday season preview show plus Ken Erickson, Cindy Balmalone during the week. Check your local listings, as they say, or as we like to say it, in the Circle SB on Twitter. Follow us there. Like us on Facebook. You know the drill. And then, boys, we're going to be out and playing softball. Maybe we'll do some, the Twitter Space thing, or
we'll have some things lined up.
Well, the three of us may reunite in about a week to recap what we saw in person. And keep it here. This is your home all year long in the Circle. We'll be all over the place in the country. Division 1, 2, 3. Division 2's underway. Weather is playing havoc to the Division 2 season. Congrats, though, to Christine Roser. First win as head coach at Rollins. 9-0 over Shorter. They finally played tonight. So we'll see if they can catch up on the schedule. I'm sure Vic will tweet out all the Division 2 updates there. Good luck. They're playing like till 5 in the morning, I think. I don't know.
I'll probably be waking up and it'll still be playing.
That's true. Justin, tell the audience where they can find you one more time.
Well, I'm an extra inning softball now. All of our previews, teams, conferences, all that for the preseason, all of our regular season coverage, extrainningsoftball.com, and Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all your social media channels. Don't worry about checking your local listings. We're not in there. Just extrainningsoftball.com. That's where everything is.
Including my bracketology, my preseason bracketology. 64 teams. Again, let me emphasize that. 64 teams, not 70, not 72, not 76. Anyway, enjoy that.
True.
Thank you, Justin, for joining us. Thanks to Jenna Becerra for joining us. For Victor, I'm Eric. The almighty Victor Anderson. I'm Eric Lopez merely. We thank you for joining us on this edition of In the Circle.
Good night, Canada.